I folded the bank statement in half and slipped it into the inside pocket of my old Carhartt jacket, right next to the invitation my son had mailed me 3 weeks earlier. The envelope still smelled faintly like his wife's perfume. I remember standing there in my kitchen, holding both pieces of paper, thinking, let's see how this goes. My name is Ted. Ted Calloway. I'm 63 years old. I drive a 2009 Ford F-150 with a cracked side mirror, and until about 14 months ago, I was, by every visible measure, nobody special. I want to be clear about that. I'm not telling this story to make myself sound like some kind of genius or saint. I made mistakes. I have regrets. But I also spent 31 years building something quietly in the background, while the people closest to me looked right through me, and what happened at my son's graduation party is something I'll carry for the rest of my life. Not with bitterness. I'm past that now, but it's worth telling. So let me start at the beginning. I grew up outside of Akron, Ohio. My father worked at the Goodyear plant until it downsized. Then he drove a school bus. My mother cleaned houses 3 days a week and made the best pot roast I've ever eaten in my life. We weren't poor exactly, but we knew where the edges were. You learned not to reach past them. I got into plumbing because my Uncle Phil needed a helper one summer when I was 19. I was supposed to go to community college in the fall. I never went. The work suited me. I liked the logic of it, the way water follows rules, the way a good seal holds forever if you do it right. By the time I was 26, I had my master license and 3 guys working under me. I married Sandra when I was 28. She was a dental hygienist from Canton, bright and funny and beautiful in a way that made me nervous every time she walked into a room. We had our son Kevin in 1993, then our daughter Amy in 1996. For a while things were good. The marriage didn't survive my 40s. That's the honest version. I won't put it all on Sandra, and I won't put it all on me. We grew into different people, and we stopped making the effort to find each other again. She remarried in 2012, a financial advisor named Philip who wears khakis and coaches his stepkid's soccer team. Good for her. I mean that sincerely. After the divorce, Kevin and Amy stayed with their mother during the school year. I saw them on weekends, holidays, the occasional Tuesday when Sandra needed a break. I paid child support on time, every month, without being asked twice. I showed up to every school play, every baseball game, every parent-teacher night that I was invited to. Sometimes I wasn't invited. I showed up anyway. Kevin was different from Amy. Amy, she always found a way to let me know she was glad I was there. Even when she was a teenager and wasn't supposed to admit she liked her dad, she'd find some small way. A text, a look across the table, a hand on my arm when she said goodbye. Kevin was harder. Not mean, not cruel, just distant in a way I couldn't ever quite close. I always told myself it was his mother's influence, or the new stepfather, or just the particular architecture of teenage boys who feel abandoned, even when they aren't. I made excuses for it because he was my son and that's what you do. He got into Ohio State. I paid for 2 years of it, $24,000 in total, money I borrowed against the business and paid back over 3 years. Sandra and Philip covered the rest. Kevin graduated in 2016 with a degree in business administration. He got a job at a logistics company in Columbus. He married a woman named Bryn, sharp, ambitious, the kind of person who sends a follow-up email within 20 minutes. I liked her, actually. I still do, in a complicated way. After the wedding, I saw Kevin maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Birthday dinners where I drove 90 minutes each way. Thanksgiving at Sandra's, where I sat at the end of the table and made conversation with Philip's brother about the Browns. Christmas drop-offs of presents that got a text, thank you, usually the next day. I'm not saying Kevin was a bad son. I'm saying he had learned, somewhere along the way, that I was the background, the obligation, the guy who showed up and didn't need much in return. Which brings me to the business. I incorporated Calloway Plumbing and Mechanical Services in 2001. Nothing glamorous, commercial contracts, a little residential, some HVAC subcontracting on the side. I kept my overhead low, paid my guys well, and stayed out of debt except when I had to grow. By 2015, I had 11 employees, 2 trucks, and contracts with 4 property management companies in the Columbus metro area. In 2019, I started talking to a regional plumbing and mechanical services group out of Cincinnati, one of those private equity-backed roll-up companies buying independent shops across the Midwest. They'd approached me twice before and I'd said no. The third time, I was 57 years old. My knees hurt every morning, and I was tired of being the guy who had to show up when something went sideways at 2 in the morning. We negotiated for 8 months. I had a business attorney in Columbus, a woman named Sandra, which I always found funny, and she was worth every penny. The deal closed in October 2019. After taxes and attorney fees and the broker's cut, I walked away with a little over $1 million. I put $1.8 million into a managed portfolio through a fee-only advisor I found through a referral. The rest I kept liquid. I didn't buy a new truck. I didn't move. I didn't tell anyone. Not Sandra. Not Amy. Not Kevin. Not because I wanted to deceive them. Understand that. It was more that I had watched, over the preceding decade, the way money changes how people see you. Or rather, how it reveals the way they already see you. I'd had a buddy in the trades who came into some money after his mother died, and within 6 months he had cousins. He didn't know he had a girlfriend who suggested they needed a bigger apartment, and a financial advisor who turned out to be his girlfriend's brother. I didn't want that. And honestly, I was curious. I wanted to know who I was to the people in my life without the money. Just Ted. Busted side mirror, Ted. Old Carhartt jacket, Ted. I got my answer. Kevin's MBA graduation from Fisher College of Business was scheduled for May of 2023. He'd gone back for the degree part-time while working. I respected that, genuinely. And he and Bryn threw a big graduation party at their house in Dublin, a suburb of Columbus. They invited about 60 people. Bryn's parents, her sister and her husband, Kevin's friends from work and school, Sandra and Philip, a few of Kevin's buddies from Ohio State, and me. Kevin called me 3 weeks before to tell me about it. The conversation was about 4 minutes long. He gave me the date, the address, the start time. He told me it was casual, but nice, his word. Nice casual, he said, not jeans and a work shirt, Dad. I said I understood. He said good, and then he said he had to jump on a call. 4 minutes. I want to be precise about the weeks before that party because I think the small things matter. A few days after Kevin called, Amy called too. Her call was 32 minutes. She asked how my knee was doing, remembered I'd mentioned it at Christmas. She asked if I needed a ride to Columbus. She told me she was proud of her brother and that she was glad I was coming. That's Amy. I thought about what to wear. I had a navy blazer I bought for Amy's wedding in 2021, still in the dry cleaning bag in my closet. I could have worn that. I thought about it. But I wore khakis and a clean blue Oxford shirt and my good leather shoes. Nothing wrong with any of it. I've worn that combination to parent-teacher nights, to church, to business dinners with property managers who controlled 500,000 square feet of commercial real estate. I looked like a 63-year-old man who knew how to dress for a Saturday afternoon party in suburban Columbus. I drove myself. I got there a little after 2. The house was nice, not ostentatious. Kevin and Bryn were careful with money, I knew that, but a well-maintained colonial in a good neighborhood with a big backyard where someone had set up a tent and string lights and about 15 round tables with white tablecloths, catered. A bar on one side, a food station on the other. Maybe 40 people already there when I arrived. Kevin met me at the door. He shook my hand. He looked good, put together, happy. He walked me out to the backyard and introduced me to a couple of his work friends, then excused himself. I got to go do the rounds, he said. I said, of course, and that was essentially the last real conversation I had with my son for the next 2 hours. I circulated. I talked to Sandra and Philip, which was fine. We've gotten to a civil place after all these years. I talked to Amy and her husband for a while, which was the highlight of the afternoon. I had a beer and ate some really good brisket. I was standing near the edge of the tent, watching Kevin and Bryn receive their guests like they were hosting a state dinner, when Bryn's mother came and stood next to me. I didn't know her well. We'd met at the wedding and once at Christmas 2 years prior. Nice enough woman. She gestured toward Kevin, who was laughing loudly with a group of his business school friends, looking like the center of gravity in the room. "Your son's done well for himself," she said. "He has," I said. I was genuinely proud. "It helps to have good support," she said. And then she looked me up and down. I saw it, quick but unmistakable, and she said nothing else and drifted away. I'm a 63-year-old man. I've been looked at that way before. I know what that look means. It says, "What exactly did you contribute?" 20 minutes later, Kevin was giving a little speech, thanking Bryn, thanking his professors, thanking Philip, who has been a real mentor to me, more than he knows. He talked about Bryn's dad, who'd given him advice about leadership. He thanked his mother. He didn't mention me, not once. I stood there in the back of the tent holding my beer, and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the 2 years of Ohio State tuition. I thought about the summer I drove to Columbus every weekend for 6 weeks straight to help him and Bryn move into and then renovate their first house. I did the plumbing roughing myself, saved them at least $6,000. I thought about the money I'd lent him in 2018 when he and Bryn had a cash flow problem right after they bought the Dublin house. $15,000, which I told him he didn't have to pay back, and he didn't. I didn't need a monument. I didn't need a speech, but a sentence. One sentence. Somewhere in there. "My dad is here, and I'm glad he came." Something. After the speech, Kevin worked his way back through the crowd toward the bar. He passed near me and stopped, and for a second I thought, okay, here it is. He's going to say something privately. Something real. He looked at me and said, "Hey, Dad, I meant to say you could have dressed up a little more." He said it with a half smile, like it was light-hearted, like it was a joke between us. "Bryn's parents were asking who you were, and I just, you know." He shrugged. Anyway, he patted my arm and kept walking. I stood there. "Bryn's parents were asking who you were." He was embarrassed of me. At his own graduation party, in front of 60 people and a catered brisket and string lights and everyone who mattered in his life, he was embarrassed of his father because of a blue Oxford shirt and a pair of khakis. I thought about the $2.1 million sitting in a managed portfolio in Columbus. I picked up another beer, went and sat with Amy, and I didn't say a word about any of it. Amy knew. I could tell she knew. She saw the look on my face when I sat down, and she just quietly reached over and put her hand on mine for a second. She didn't ask. She's known her brother longer than I have, in some ways. We ate together, Amy and her husband and me. We talked about her job. She's a physical therapist in Cincinnati, and about their new dog, and about a trip they were planning to Portugal. Normal family conversation, the kind I didn't get enough of. Around 5 o'clock, people started to leave. Kevin and Bryn were standing at the door doing the handshake and hug send-off. When I made my way over, Kevin shook my hand. Bryn thanked me for coming. Kevin said, "Drive safe, Dad." I said I would. I drove home on 70 West for 90 minutes, watching the sun go down over central Ohio. I was not angry. I want to be accurate about that. Anger would have been clean, almost satisfying. What I felt was something older and heavier, the specific exhaustion of having finally accepted something you'd been quietly refusing to accept for a long time. My son saw me the way the world had always seen me. A working man. Background. Interchangeable. Not quite worth a sentence in a speech. And I decided something on that drive home. I decided I was done performing the role. Here's what nobody tells you about selling a business. It doesn't change who you are. It doesn't fix anything. You're still the same person with the same creaky knees, getting up in the same kitchen. What it gives you, if you're careful and patient, is options. I had been patient for almost 4 years. I had watched and waited. I had seen what I needed to see. 3 weeks after the graduation party, I called my financial advisor, and we had a long conversation. I asked him to walk me through the full picture, the portfolio, the interest income, the projected growth. He talked for 45 minutes. I took notes on a legal pad. When he was done, I asked him to help me think through some estate planning questions. Then I called my attorney, and then I called Amy. I drove to Cincinnati on a Tuesday in early June, on a day Amy didn't have patience until the afternoon. I brought coffee and a box of Grater's donuts, which have been her favorite since she was 9 years old. We sat at her kitchen table and I told her everything. I watched her face go through about 6 different expressions in the space of 30 seconds. Surprise, confusion, calculation. She's her mother's daughter. And then something quieter. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "Dad, how long have you been carrying this?" 4 years, I said. She was quiet for a while. She asked smart questions. She always asks smart questions. She asked if I was okay, not financially, but actually okay. I said I thought so. She asked what I was planning to do. I told her. Her eyes got bright. "He's going to feel terrible," she said. "I know," I said. "That's not really the point." "Then what's the point?" I thought about it. "I want him to know that he had a chance to see me. And he chose not to." She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "Okay," she said. "Okay, I think I understand that. Kevin's birthday is in September. He turned 30 in 2023, which Bryn had been planning a party around for months. Amy had mentioned it in passing. A big dinner at a restaurant in downtown Columbus, close friends and family, maybe 20 people. She'd texted me the details in August. I confirmed I was coming. I drove up on a Saturday evening. I wore my navy blazer. The restaurant was nice. One of those places downtown where the portions are architectural and a glass of bourbon cost $16, the kind of place I'd driven past my whole life and never eaten in. I arrived on time. Kevin and Bryn were already there with her parents and a handful of their friends. Kevin seemed surprised to see the blazer, I noticed. He didn't say anything. He introduced me around the table, this time with a full sentence. "This is my dad. He drove up from Akron. Progress. We had drinks. We ordered. We made conversation." Kevin was relaxed and happy. It was his birthday. His friends were there. Everything was in its right place. He told a long story about a deal at work that had gone right. Everyone laughed in the right places. He was good at that. After dinner, when the birthday cake came out and the candles were blown and everyone had a glass of champagne, Kevin stood and said a few words. Grateful. Lucky. Looking forward to the next chapter. I waited until after cake, until the room had loosened a little and people were picking up their coats. I touched Kevin's arm and asked if I could speak with him for a minute. He said, sure, a little puzzled, and we stepped to the side. I took the envelope out of my jacket pocket. "I have something I've been meaning to give you," I said. "For graduation. I'm sorry it's late." He looked at the envelope. "Dad, you didn't have to." "Open it," I said. He opened it. Inside was a birthday card, simple, from the drugstore, and a folded piece of paper. He unfolded the paper. Fell to the paper. It was a printout from my financial advisor's office. A one-page summary of my portfolio value as of August 31, 2023, along with a letter outlining my updated estate plan, a trust structure that divided the estate, upon my death, into 3 equal parts, one for Amy, one for a scholarship fund I had set up at the Akron Public School District in my parents' names, and one for a rotating set of charitable causes that Amy would have discretion over. Kevin's name was not on it. He stood there reading it for a long time. Then he read it again. I watched his face do the same thing Amy's had done, but differently. The surprise was the same. But where Amy's face had gone soft, Kevin's went pale. "I don't understand," he said. "What part?" I asked. "Why is I'm not?" He looked up. "Dad, I sold the business 4 years ago," I said. "I've been fine, more than fine. I just never mentioned it. I kept my voice level. I didn't mention it for the same reason you didn't mention me in your speech. Some things you just don't say out loud. The table behind us was oblivious. Bryn was laughing at something with her girlfriend. Amy was watching me from across the room with an expression I couldn't quite read. Kevin looked at the paper again. "This can be changed," he said. "Estate plans can be changed." "They can," I agreed. He was quiet. I could see him working through it, the numbers on the paper, the implications, the sequence of events that had led here. "He's smart, my son. He always was." "The party," he said finally. "What I said? The shirt." "That's part of it," I said. "Sure. What's the other part?" I thought about how to say it. "The other part is that I've been your father for 30 years. And in 30 years you've never once called me to ask how I was doing when you didn't need something." I paused. "That's not an accusation. I'm just telling you what I see." He stared at the floor. His jaw was tight. "I'm not dead," I said. "The plan can change. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing this so you'll understand that the version of me you decided you knew, the guy in the Oxford shirt who isn't worth a sentence in a speech, that's not actually who I am, and I'd like you to know who I actually am if you're interested." He didn't say anything for a while. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. I'll give him that. He wasn't calculating. That came later, maybe, but right then he wasn't. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. "I know," I said. "I believe you. That was 18 months ago. I won't wrap this up in a bow because life doesn't work that way. Kevin and I have had 4 long phone calls since September 2023. Real ones, not the 4-minute kind. He asked me once about the business, how I built it, what I'd learned, whether I had regrets. We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. Bryn sent me a handwritten note in November, which I wasn't expecting. It was gracious. "Amy thinks I was too hard on him. Maybe she's right. But she also said something to me last spring that I keep thinking about. She said, 'Dad, I think you needed him to see you, not just the money. I think that's accurate. The estate plan is still the same. I haven't changed it, not because I'm punishing Kevin, but because I'm in no hurry. I want to see who shows up, not at the party. In the years between now and the end, that's where character actually lives. I still drive the 2009 F-150. The mirror still has the crack in it. I looked at new trucks twice, and both times I drove home in the old one. Some habits are deeper than money. Last month I got a text from Kevin. 'Just checking in,' it said. 'How are your knees?' Amy must have mentioned it. I sat in my kitchen and held the phone for a while. Then I texted back, 'Better. Headed to the hardware store. Want to grab lunch next time you're in Akron?' He said yes. We'll see." I've thought a lot about what actually happened that night at the restaurant. Not the envelope, not the numbers on the paper. The moment before that when Kevin said, "I'm sorry, Dad," and I believed him. That's the part I keep coming back to. Here's what I know after 63 years. The way people treat you when they think you have nothing is the truest information you will ever receive about them. Not because they're monsters. Most people aren't monsters. It's because that's when the performance stops. When there's no audience, no upside, no reason to be careful. That's when you find out what someone actually thinks of you. Kevin thought I was background. He didn't decide that cruelly. He just absorbed it over 30 years of watching me show up quietly. And he filed me accordingly. That's on both of us, honestly. What I did wrong was let it go too long. I kept telling myself the distance was temporary, that things would shift, that one day he'd come around and we'd have the relationship I wanted. But I was waiting for something to change, that I had no intention of changing myself. That's not patience. That's avoidance dressed up as patience. There's a difference, and I didn't learn it until I was 60 years old. What Kevin did wrong was simpler. He stopped paying attention. And when you stop paying attention to the people who love you, you start making assumptions. He assumed he knew who I was. He assumed I was the same guy I'd been at his baseball games in 2005. He never asked, and I never corrected him. The estate plan wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that, even now. I didn't sit in my kitchen plotting his downfall. It was more like a mirror. I wanted him to see the gap between the man he'd invented in his head, the background dad in the Oxford shirt, and the man who had actually been standing in front of him for 30 years. That gap is where a relationship goes to die, and I needed him to see it before one of us ran out of time to fix it. Amy understood this without me having to explain it. She always saw me clearly, and I think about that a lot too, about how differently two kids from the same house can turn out. She didn't have more advantages. She didn't have an easier path. She just kept choosing to look. That's a choice. It costs something, and it pays back in ways you can't put a number on. What I want anyone to take from this isn't about money. The money was incidental. It just happened to be the thing that made the gap visible. What matters is the question underneath it. Do you actually know the people in your life? Or do you know the story you decided to tell about them a long time ago? Because those are two very different things, and most of us are walking around with outdated maps and wondering why we keep getting lost. I'm not done with my son. I don't think he's done with me either. That text last month, "How are your knees?" was small, but small is how everything real starts. We don't rebuild 30 years of missed attention in a single phone call. You do it in Tuesday lunches and 2-minute check-ins, and eventually, if you're both willing, in something that starts to feel like knowing each other again. I'll take that. At 63, with a cracked mirror on a 2009 truck and more money than I'll ever spend, I'll take that.